The first shot crossed the Meridian's bow at 40 meters. Not a warning shot in any technical sense. Warning shots didn't come that close. Warning shots were symbolic. They communicated stop without risking hull. What crossed the Meridian's bow at 40 meters was something else. It was a statement. The Keth destroyer Sovereign Reach was telling Captain Amara, a Semensa, something very specific. We are not interested in your response. A Semensa had been a freight captain for 11 years. In 11 years, she had been fired upon exactly once before by pirates in the outer reaches who had subsequently regretted it and had filed a formal complaint about unreasonable defensive tactics, which was the kind of complaint that happened when pirates encountered someone who didn't behave the way pirates expected. She looked at the shot's trajectory on her display. 40 meters. She looked at the Sovereign Reach on her tactical feed. Keth Destroyer, Class 4. 12 weapon systems active. Engine configuration consistent with intercept rather than pursuit. They'd been waiting here, not chasing her. She looked at her first officer, Kofi Vasquezadeimi, who was looking back at her with the specific expression of someone who very much wanted her to do the obvious thing. The obvious thing was to run. The Meridian was a cargo hauler, class to freighter, carrying agricultural equipment and medical supplies for the Kurith Station cluster. It had no offensive weapons. Its defensive systems were adequate for debris fields and minimal piracy. Not for a Keth class, for destroyer, with 12 active weapon systems and the specific intent that a 40-meter bow shot communicated. The obvious thing was to run, she said. All stop. Vasquezadeimi said. Captain, she said. All stop, Kofi. She paused. And get me a channel to the Sovereign Reach. What Captain Semensa knew that the Sovereign Reach did not know was what the Meridian was carrying, not the manifest. The manifest was accurate and accessible and described exactly what she had said. Agricultural equipment and medical supplies for Kurith Station cluster, population 243,000. What the Sovereign Reach didn't know was the second manifest. The second manifest wasn't in any system the Keth Destroyer could access. It wasn't in the Meridian's official cargo documentation, or her flight plan, or any registry that the Keth Sovereignty's intelligence network monitored. It was in the sealed diplomatic case in a Semensa's personal quarters, which had been placed there by a Concordance Diplomatic Division courier 3 days before departure, with instructions that it was to be delivered to the Kurith Station Cluster Senior Diplomatic Representative, and that its existence was not to be logged in any system the Meridian's crew didn't personally control. She hadn't opened the case. She didn't know what was in it. She knew the weight of it, which was light. She knew the security classification on the exterior, which was the highest she had ever seen on a document in person. She knew that Corey who had placed it for leaving if anyone asked for it, and she knew that a Keth destroyer had been waiting at this specific point in her route with 12 weapon systems active. Waiting for her specifically, which meant someone knew she had it. Running would confirm it. Running would tell the Sovereign Reach that the Meridian had something worth running with. All stuck out of the counter-of play. Ollie Stoppy said, she waited for the channel. Fleet Commander Sethral of the Sovereign Reach was not a man who was frequently surprised. 23 years in the Keth military had produced a specific and reliable relationship with surprise. He had learned to anticipate what other parties would do by understanding what they had to work with, and he had found that what other parties had to work with almost always produced the responses he expected. The Meridian was a Class 2 freighter. Class 2 freighters ran. They had to run. They had no alternative. They were cargo vessels. They carried things, and they transported those things from one place to another, and when someone with 12 active weapon systems fired across their bow, they ran because running was what you did when someone with 12 active weapon systems fired across your bow. The Meridian had stopped. He looked at his tactical officer. She looked back at him. He said, "Is the freighter damaged?" She said, "No, sir. Engines are functional." The all stop was a command decision. He looked at the communication request in his queue. The Meridian was hailing him. He had fired across her bow at 40 meters, not a distance that invited conversation, and she was hailing him. He accepted the channel. A Semensa had used the 60 seconds while she waited for the channel to do 3 things. The first was to transmit the Meridian's full cargo manifest to every monitoring station within signal range on the open frequency. Not encrypted, open. Every party in the region now had documentation of what the Meridian was officially carrying. The second was to activate the Meridian's personal log, recording on full environmental capture every sensor, every camera, every communication feed, time-stamped and uploading continuously to the Concordance's long-range relay network. The third was to compose a brief message to the Concordance Diplomatic Division's emergency channel, which she sent before the Sovereign Reach channel opened. Meridian stopped under fire from Keth Destroyer's Sovereign Reach. Position logged, cargo documented, recording active. Then she opened the channel. She said, "Fleet Commander, this is Captain Amara Asemensa of the CSS Meridian. I've brought the Meridian to all stop in response to your warning." She paused. "I want to be transparent about a few things before we continue," Sethral said. "Captain, you are in a restricted transit corridor and you will prepare for boarding inspection." She said, "I want to be transparent about a few things first, Fleet Commander." She paused. "I have just transmitted my full cargo manifest on the open frequency to 14 monitoring stations within signal range." She paused. "I have also activated full environmental recording, which is uploading continuously to the Concordance relay network." She paused. "And I have notified the Concordance Diplomatic Division of our current situation, position, and the fact that your vessel fired on us." She paused. She said, "I'm telling you this not as a threat. I'm telling you because everything that happens in the next 20 minutes is going to be on a very complete record that a significant number of parties are already watching." She paused. "I thought you should know that before you decide what comes next." A silence. She said, "Fleet Commander, my cargo is agricultural equipment and medical supplies for a population of 243,000 people." She paused. "It is documented, open, and being watched." She paused. "I'd like to understand what the restricted corridor designation is based on. Because the transit corridor I'm using has been an approved Concordance commercial route for 6 years. Sethral said, "The corridor's status was revised 11 days ago." She said, "I departed 9 days ago." She paused. "I did not receive notification of a revised status." A pause. She said, "Fleet Commander, I want to make sure the record reflects the following." She paused. "The Meridian received no notification of a corridor status change before departure. The Meridian's cargo is fully documented and has been publicly transmitted. The Meridian stopped when fired upon rather than running, which I hope communicates that I have nothing to conceal." She paused. "I am prepared to cooperate fully with an inspection." She paused. "I am also prepared to wait here, with this recording running, for as long as it takes for both our governments to review a situation in which a Keth destroyer fired on an unarmed civilian freighter carrying medical supplies." The channel was quiet. She said, "Which outcome we reach is your decision, Fleet Commander." She paused. "I just want to make sure the record is clear about what the situation is before that decision is made." Sethral closed the channel. He looked at his tactical officer. She said, 14 monitoring stations received the manifest transmission." She paused. "The recording upload is confirmed active." She paused. The diplomatic division notification was received and acknowledged for minutes ago. He said, "What is in the cargo?" She said, "Agricultural equipment and medical supplies, sir, consistent with the manifest. Our passive scan confirms mass and density profiles consistent with the stated contents." He said, "The diplomatic case." She said, "If there is one, our passive scan can't confirm it at this range, sir. It would require a full active scan or a physical boarding," he said, "which is on the record now." She said, "Yes, sir. An active scan or boarding of a stopped civilian freighter carrying documented medical supplies, while 14 monitoring stations watch, is on the record." She paused. "Whatever we find or don't find is also on the record." Sethral thought about the intelligence that had put him at this position. Intelligence that had said the Meridian was carrying something significant. Intelligence that had said the Meridian's captain had something that needed to be retrieved before she reached Kareth Station. The intelligence had not accounted for a captain who stopped when fired upon and then spent 60 seconds making herself the most visible object in the region. He thought about the 40-meter shot. That was also on the record. He said, "Open the channel." He said, "Captain Mensa, the Meridian may proceed." She said, "Thank you, Fleet Commander." She paused. "I'd like to note for the record that the Sovereign Reach fired on the Meridian at approximately 40 meters bow clearance, and that the Meridian sustained no damage." She paused. "I'll be filing a standard incident report with the Concordance's Transit Authority." He said, "That is your right." She said, "I know." She paused. "I'm noting it now, so the record is consistent." She paused. "Is there anything you'd like to add to the record before we continue?" A pause. He said, "No." She said, "Understood." She paused. "Safe transit, Fleet Commander." She closed the channel. She looked at Vasquez-Daimi. He said, "You stopped a freighter in front of a destroyer with 12 active weapons." She said, "I stopped a freighter that someone knew was carrying something and made stopping it more expensive than letting it go." She paused. "We're moving now." He said, "If they'd boarded," she said. "Then the record would show a Keth destroyer boarding a stopped civilian freighter carrying documented medical supplies, while 14 monitoring stations watched." She paused. "And the diplomatic case would have been in my quarters." She paused. "Which has a biometric lock." She paused. "Which would have required them to either break it on the record or leave it." He said, "That's what you were calculating." She said, "I was calculating what stopping communicated versus what running communicated." She paused. Running said, "I have something worth running with." She paused. Stopping said, "I have nothing to run from." He said, "And the diplomatic case," she said, "is still in my quarters." She paused. "Arriving at Kareth Station intact." She paused. "Which is what it needs to do." She set the Meridian back on course. Ahead, the corridor opened onto the Kareth Station cluster. 243,000 people. And whatever was in the case that someone had been willing to fire 40-meter bow shots to intercept, she didn't need to know what it was. She needed to deliver it. That was the job. She'd done the job.